This is the Lipstick Lady podcast, and we are here today to talk about projection versus protection. How are we raising our kids, ladies? Are we projecting our stuff on them, or are we protecting them? And this is something that we all talked about at my house the other day. We were sitting down having some wine and having girls' time, and we kind of got into this flowing conversation about us as parents. We all have adult children. And kind of reflecting on our lives, because we've all done some work, some self-work, and learned a lot about ourselves, maybe how our pathology and things that have happened in our personal lives have created who we are today, but then how some of those things, because all of us had very unique past. We didn't have like the ideal home life growing up. And so when you're growing up with very little tools, you try to figure out ways to say, you know, these things were good, these things were bad about my childhood, and what do I want to protect my kid from? And sometimes that protection can become too much, to the point where we're actually projecting our own things, our own fears onto them, and not giving them the space to kind of become the individuals they are. So I'll start with me. One of the biggest things that I feel like, a couple things actually. One is I never cried in front of my son. I did not ever show him emotion. And if I were going through things, whether it was financial or just whatever stresses I had in my life, I always kind of kept those things from him. And I don't think it's a bad thing per se, but especially when it comes to the emotional side, for me personally, when I was growing up, I grew up in a very, chaotic home. There was violence in the home, and I lost a parent to suicide. I had a parent that was very emotionally distraught and was very depressed herself. There was just a lot going on, and my mom, she had a lot going on in her life. It's not to say anything bad about my mother, but she was a very emotional person. And during that time in my life, I'm the oldest of the three girls, and I felt like I was the one to kind of be my mother's rock for her. And when she was emotional and crying and things about the things that were going on in her life, I felt helpless. And I think that for me, when I had my son, I just didn't want him to feel that helplessness. And so I just kind of kept this stoic, like everything's together. But now that he's older, what I'm seeing is that I was protecting him, but I was also projecting my own stuff. I was telling myself, I'm not going to do to him what was done to me, so to speak, right? And not thinking in depth about maybe the consequences to that. Because now, as my son is older, he's 25 years old, the way he sees women, and when he's out there dating, it's almost like he expects everyone to kind of be this like hard woman. And I'm like, no, she's too hard. I need her to be like, she needs to soften up. But he doesn't know that. I didn't demonstrate that to him.
What a great point.
Yeah.
So does he actually say that to you, or you just, that's what you notice about him?
He's never actually, and I probably should ask him actually, because we're super close and we talk about a lot of things. It's just more the conversations, and when he is out there dating and some of the things that he'll say, I will notice like that these girls are young. He's young. They're young girls and they're acting like young women, and he just seems very intolerant. Like he gets very impatient with them. He feels like, that they need to just be more. Why are they so emotional? And I'm like, that's how girls are. And he's like, you weren't like that. He does have an old soul, but he has an old soul because he had like this hardcore kind of mom kind of thing, And again, even me being kind of a hardcore parent, I was very strict with him when he was younger. And as he got older, I eased the reins a little bit. But a lot of that was projection for sure. Really wanting to kind of keep his life in a bubble, so to speak. And one of the consequences, or go ahead, because I'm rambling.
I think like all of us having a difficult upbringing, my dad was on drugs. My mom will probably kill me, but she was in that life. And, my parents divorced or got separated when I was about 14 years old, I guess, 12, or I was either 12 or I think I was 12. And the way I dealt with that with my kids when me and their dad separated, I didn't have a conversation with my kids about it. It just was like, mommy and daddy are separating and that's it. And not even realizing the trauma they went through with that, just not understanding why. And I just thought that, okay, I'm going to have their dad around whenever he wants to be around. I never wanted them to know why, I guess, to protect myself, not wanting them to look at me different or look at their dad different. I just thought I had it all under control. And as long as I'm living, they have a good life, you know, they're sheltered. My kids didn't want for much. I thought I provided the best life I could for them. But now that they're adults, the two older ones, I've recently had the conversation and asked them how they felt about it. And I actually shared with them why we separated and why we got divorced, and gave them the honest, real answer.
How was that? What was their... did you feel like they needed that conversation, or were they relieved by being open with them? Because I feel like it's never too late.
I do. I feel like it was a relief. And me even thinking that was the only issue. So finding out, they dealt with a lot of death from people really close to them at young ages. And again, I processed things one way, and I just assumed they did too. I didn't really get the counseling that was needed or had these deep conversations. And they just kind of both feel like nothing in life is permanent. Everything's temporary. My son shared with me that he feels like he sabotages relationships sometimes because he doesn't, he's like, everything's just temporary. So I think the conversations were helpful. I think they were relatable. They felt more like, okay, my mom's human, and I have to, I'm human. Like I did the best I knew how to do. I wish I can go back and change it, but we have to start from here. I apologize. I feel terrible about it, but at the end of the day, I think I did a good job with my kids. That's just one thing that I feel like I thought I was protecting them for.
You did a great job, but from what I know, about that and having their father around, and you said something earlier, you don't want them to change their impression of yourself and and their father, and they're going to form their own understanding. But if we don't communicate that, and I'm on that page too, although I'm still married, there's things my daughter, I don't share with her because I don't want to, compromise her understanding of who either one of us is. But at the same time, she's going to be 25. She has a boyfriend. They're serious. and the funny part about it is he's a lot like me. And she tells me, oh my God, he reminds me of you so much, Mom. Like he's distant.
We do that.
I know.
We always end up with a parent that our relationships are reflections of people we are one of our parents. I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, and it's the overprotective part that he does with her. Like, you sure you want to go downtown and go hang out with your friends? You got to be careful. He's always looking after her, protecting her in that way because, as a parent, you're looking after your kid on that blind side. We all have them, like I although that might not happen to you, that could. So make sure you're mindful about that. And he's also a police officer, so he sees things that are heavy.
But again, that's projection too. It's like I was a medic, and there are things that I saw as an EMT, and you get paranoid. You get a little. There is some PTSD in the things that you're visualizing and seeing. And you get overprotective because it's one thing to say, let me teach my kid these things in life to be vigilant of and to pay attention to. And, you teach them things. But when we become these helicopter parents where we don't even let them out of the bubble to even see if they're capable of managing things because we're so afraid. We have the projection in our mind of what's going to happen. And we create these grandiose stories and things happen to people. And then you're like, I'm going to teach you these things, but only underneath me, like they're still in our womb going with us everywhere. And it's like, I'll tell you, like, one of the moments for me that really hit was recently with my son. Everything in his life up until this point has been really treading really well for him. Like he's been just the college he wanted to get into, he got into. Just everything has been a yes for him, right? Go, go, go. And he's a bit of a perfectionist, but we all put him on this pedestal growing up. Now, again, I thought that this was protecting and you build your children up and you give them all this, whatever, but we all were doing it, right? The whole village. But he was getting so much stimulation from that he became somewhat of a perfectionist, a people pleaser. Like he wanted to make sure he was doing the right thing for everyone all the time. And he'll probably kill me for this conversation. But recently, when he got out of college, he got a really, really good job in New York. And it was like next level everything. He was making great money right out the gate, right out of college, right? And it was in the tech space. And as we know, the tech world just completely just blew up, and banks started closing, all that. And it affected his job. He was laid off. And in that moment, when he came home, because he was very distraught, understandably, and he kind of had like a little bit of a breakdown over what had happened. And when he came home, I said, just come home and let's kind of work through this, you know? And I realized in that moment, I have been praising him to protect him, but I've been projecting. All of my insecurities, I didn't want him to have. So I overstimulated that. I overdid this and that. And so my son is facing his first crisis in his life. And because I projected so much, that I didn't really teach him coping skills, because I always picked up every piece for him, whether he wanted it or not. He never even had to ask. If I felt like he was in a situation, I was there to fix it. But it's like, I have to learn to like, he's got to like learn to deal with this and learn to cope and learn to understand that things in life will happen and it is not going to be the end of the world, but he's got to be able to sort that out on his own. And that was one of those big moments, because I'd never seen my son so like down, you know, and so like questioning himself.
There's nothing you can do other than let him ride through it.
Yeah, and you know, and be the mom and talk him off that proverbial ledge, you know what I mean? But here's one thing that really was like, when it went like punched me in the face, that I projected. Because in that moment when he was home, the first thing I was asking him was, do you have any thoughts of suicide? And he gave me this look I'll never forget. And he's like, almost like, wait, should I be thinking that? And he's like, wait, what, Mom? And he goes, is that like a thought I'm supposed to be having? And it made my stomach like turn in knots. Because in that moment, I realized I lost a parent to suicide. Anytime, and it's to this day, that people are sad or they're down, I always think that's the route they're going. My mother, because she was going through her own whatever, she had made a lot of attempts on her life when I was growing up, after my dad had passed. And so I had this like paranoia of like, is this person gonna take their life if they're facing a crisis? And I projected that on my son. And literally the next day, I had to pull him aside and I said, baby, I have to apologize to you. I said, because I asked you that question. Of course, I want to know. Of course, I want to make sure he's not there. But I planted a seed in him that wasn't even there by asking that question, because it's my own crap. I was like, my son is totally capable of figuring this out. And I am there and I'm here for him to be a support. And he has a tribe behind him. So it's like a fine line.
Yeah.
There's been times where I didn't realize how aware my daughter is about certain things until I'm like, oh, okay, she's got that, you know? So I think that's just part of being a parent. You know, we have that, most parents, I should say, those who pay attention and really love and want to protect our children, there's going to be some projection in that because of our own experiences. But when we allow our kids to grow, which is hard in itself, especially me, and I mean, we both only have one, not to say 3 is not challenging. I'm sure it is, because they're all different.
I was just going to touch on that. When you're with 3 children. So my son got arrested for something he didn't do, and he spent the night in jail, and that's a whole nother story. I'd love to talk about it one day. But,
you should, actually.
I went into, y'all ain't getting my son. And I mean, I never had so much anger in my life about anything. And it was like, whatever I had to do to protect my child was what I was going to do. And in that, nothing else mattered. Not even my other 2. Not in that, it sounds terrible.
No, but
to
I know
say
what you
like
mean,
that,
though. You were super focused on that.
But I was so focused on him that I wasn't paying attention to them. So right before he got arrested, my grandmother died. Like the same month. It was in the same month. And my daughter, she was dealing with grief on her own. And she was about maybe 14 years old at the time. And one day she comes into the bathroom and and she's like trying to get my attention to talk to me. And all I heard her say was, I looked at the knife block and wondered if I cut myself, would anybody notice?
Wow.
And it was like, what have I done? You know, and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't realize she was hurting so bad. So it's like you're in protection mode, and you're trying to figure your kids out, and multiple kids, they all have different personalities. Right. And it's like, I don't have a manual, I don't have a book. And then you feel like crap as a mom because your whole objective in life is to protect your children.
Right.
And I think we would go to bat and to war for our kids over anybody else.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And it was just like, I have to step back and pay attention, you know, and I got her therapy and all that, but I just didn't realize she needed me too. I was just so focused on him. And she even said, Mommy, it's okay. I know Malik needs you right now. But I felt so bad about it.
It's so hard because we want to be everything for our children. And I think I had mentioned when we had a guy, Dom Waltower, come on the show several months ago. And one of the things that he said that really stuck with me is that sometimes the intentions are really good, but we don't understand the impact, you know? And like what you were saying, Charlene, you're like, I'm trying to protect my daughter from maybe things that were going on, but they're still watching. And as much as we think that they're not seeing things, we leave them with trying to figure it all out, what they're watching. And we, you know, I'll give you a perfect example, like another one, drinking alcohol. There was alcohol in my home growing up. And it led to a lot of problems in our household whenever there was alcohol. And another thing that I was thinking I was protecting my son for a while, I would not drink in front of my son at all. And that was wrong for me to do that. Like I literally felt like I had to, if we were going to have wine or something like that, he couldn't be around it. And at some point I started realizing, well, what am I teaching him exactly? I can show him that people can drink and be responsible with drinking. I'm so used to people drinking and it turns into violence or passing out or drunkenness. I mean, that was the neighbors and everybody in my household. And it was something that created chaos in my childhood. And I'm like, it got to a point where I was like, my son's not going to see mama drunk. It's just not something he's going to see. So I can show him that it's okay to have alcohol. And it's nothing to be ashamed of as long as you do it responsibly. And that was a protection thing, you know, and really finding a healthy balance with that.
And also for someone that was not in a relationship with his father growing up, you did it separately, but together because you're cordial. What was his life there? Did you follow the same rules together? You know, did you have that understanding together?
Yeah, well, and so his dad, his dad's like it's weird to say, but he's like my brother to me. He's like family. We're really, really close. Sure. And he's always been very much a part of Devon's life. But yes, we always communicated things. And he just wasn't like a drinker. I didn't have those concerns. They didn't even cross my mind to have the conversation because it just was never an issue for him. But I just had that thing in my head, you know. He'd go to bed and that's when I'd open up my glass of wine and read my book. It's a glass of wine and a book. It's not like a club. Right. You know what I mean?
I have a funny one. My son, where I thought I was protecting, he can't hear out of one of his ears, his left ear. So I was always worried about him crossing the street. So I'd be like, don't cross the street. And he'd
I know,
be like,
it's so funny.
You know, when he was 5 and 6, 7, it was cool, right? My grandma would be like, that boy ain't never going to learn how to walk to the store because you don't never let him walk to the store. And I'm like, he's not walking to the store. He can't hear, you know? So I'm protecting him. No, but that's his life. That's the only way he knows how to hear. He's never heard out of his left ear. So he's adjusted to life that way. So anyways, he calls me one day and he was 15 and he says, I'm at McDonald's. And I'm like, what McDonald's? He's supposed to be at school. And he's like, I'm at McDonald's. I'm like, you crossed Martin Luther King? And he's like, Mom, I'm like 15 years old already. Like I used the crosswalk. But I was so in that protection mode of my child. But I'm projecting my fears of something happening to him, not allowing him to let go. Not even my little one, and he's 13 now. I'm like, Nathaniel, don't be crossing streets and stuff. But I say it quietly, like that's a difference. I don't like yell it out loud. I say it, just be careful crossing, you know,
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm kind of like helicopter mom with that.
Well, there's been
I
times
gotta-
my daughter tells me, you have to let me fail, Mom. Like, you have to let me try things. I go,
Yeah.
well, I will, but if you have someone that can give you wisdom to take with you on that ride, then, you know, it's a blessing. But at the same time, I understand, because she was feeling sheltered and she was feeling as if I didn't believe in her abilities. And the reality is, it's not that. It's, if I know if you go that route, this is going to happen, that's the outcome, then my job is to protect you. That's not a projection, that's a fact.
At what
Right.
point do we let them get burned?
Just, yeah.
Just touch the stove.
Right. And that's a reality that we
And
have
it is
to,
a projection, though.
Yeah.
It is, because your assumption with that is that you know better than she does because you have this wisdom or these experiences in your life. But although we're older and we've had life experiences, we don't necessarily always know better.
No, and
because
that's a subjective thing for sure.
they're experiencing life different. And the reason why we know better is because we actually had to go through the things.
Right.
And no matter how much I can tell a person something, some people need to literally experience life. They just got to experience the failures. You know, that's one thing I do tell my son. Your responsibility in life is to fail as often as possible. And what I mean by that is because it shows that you're trying, right? It's like fail, but fail forward. Look at, like, this is the failure, like the job thing. Okay, Vonnie, the job's gone. Okay. And again, it's me trying to be a little bit softer, right? Because again, I project this matter-of-fact personality instead of like being soft and motherly. I'm just like matter-of-fact, and it drives him crazy. But I'm like, the job is gone. What's next? Okay, it's not a failure. It's not personal. Don't take it personally, because he was taking it personally. I said, you're not looking at the big picture of what's happening in the economy, what's happening in the tech space, why they're letting people go, how many of you all are being let go. It's not just a you thing. It's not that they didn't like you. And this is where that perfectionism and just wanting to make sure he's, you know, because he's very driven, but he's driven for others. As you got to drive yourself. And every opposition is an opportunity for your life. But again, here I go, mama being matter of fact and really needing to soften the reins a little bit. Say, you know, Lorraine, your son is going through something. You give him a little bit of tough love, but then you allow him to talk through and walk through what he's experiencing and let him go through it.
As we all did.
But it's hard.
Yeah, I know. It is hard because that's our kid.
I think we were just thrown in the fire. We didn't have a choice.
It was a different time, yeah.
You know, we didn't have a choice on failing.
Right.
We had to make it work. We didn't have home. Well, I didn't have anybody to go back to. I had to just move
Figure
forward.
it out.
Yeah,
Figure
no
it out.
fallback.
No.
Which, I mean, I think that's an advantage, in my opinion. And and here's the other side to this too. Our kids do, at least my daughter, as much as I try to remind her that this is her life and this is our life, you make your decisions, that's your decisions. She knows that mom's here. She knows dad's there. Now, how much of a boundary line do I create between what that is? That's still my journey that I have to work through, because I don't know that.
Yeah,
you know,
me
we haven't
too.
crossed that yet.
I think it's a hard line. I think when they become adults, we're going to have our kids as God willing, we're going to have those people in our lives more as adults than we do have them as children. But we have to cut the cord. We have to say they're adults now and they have to experience a life they want to experience. And we're like, when my son hit adult and when he graduated from college and he was on his own, I took my hat off and hung it up. And I always told him that. I said, when he was little, when you're little, and it's because I took this little, I was 17 years old as a mom. I didn't know what to do as a mother, right? And I had nothing to give him. I had literally nothing. But the only thing that I could think of at that time in my life was, because I was acutely aware that I had nothing to give him, and I felt horrible about it. But I remember praying about it and saying, God, what can I give my son? And I just had this peace come over me and just give him a sense of himself. That was the only thing I could give him, right? And I didn't know how I was going to do that. So I took this child psychology course to learn about babies and their development and all that stuff. And one of the things that really stood out to me was between the age of 0 to about 8 is when they're building their subconscious minds and their cues, right? And so you want to feed that subconscious. So I was like I was really feeding that, right? Like if he was naughty, for example, I would say, you are such an amazing human being. Why did you do this? That was bad. Because I wanted to separate him as the person and the behavior as the naughty thing. Because we're just, what do parents normally, bad boy, bad kid, bad this. But it creates a thing. So I did that. But I literally told my son when he was getting ready to go to high school, I said, Mom's going to ease the reins up a little bit, but this will be our toughest years of relationship together. And I said, and I'm just letting you know to prepare yourself for that, because I am not interested in being your friend these next 4 years. I am there to keep you in line and keep you focused, because these are the years that you're going to be wanting to do all kinds of stuff. So we're not going to be friends. I am going to be mother. And there will come a time in our lives where we will be friends, but there's different stages to motherhood. And he was like, she's crazy, but I wasn't lying.
That's true, yeah.
And so when he finally got out of college and went on to do big, I hung the hat up. I told him, I'm your mother always, but I'm not mommy anymore. I don't need to raise him. I don't need to, if whatever's in there is in there at this point. Now I can offer him guidance when he asks for it. But I have to trust myself that I did a good enough job for him to make his right choices, you know?
Sure. Yeah, and have them create their own understandings and reasonings in life, because otherwise they'll walk around confused and unclear, and there's got to be some form of direction.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, you're right. Those high school years. Yeah, you know, and a mother of a daughter, I think it's the projection is almost by default, because she's a girl. I'm a girl. You know, I was a teenager. Although our life was completely different, there's still that. I was a teenager too. Come on, you're not going to run that by me. Although she was not even thinking anything like that. That was me, because of what I understood. So I always had that one eye open. Plus, I was a young mom too. You know, I was aware. I was hip. I'm still in the know of things, and so it was just interesting. Now, fast forward, she's a wise young lady, and you know, I'm grateful for that. But there's still things that are always going to be there and show up that I may project or want to protect.
Well, how do you find that? Because I know you shared something with us that your daughter's going to make a decision, and I don't know how much of that you want to share, but she was going to make a decision that you and your husband, and she came to you all. But how do you find yourself saying, okay, when do I just say, whatever you want to do, you do it? Where do we find the line with just completely letting go, or do we ever completely
at this
just let
point
go?
with her? I trust her decisions because I know where I'm at, and I feel that she's going to make her decisions regardless. You know, that's it. But if I can be present and a voice of reason for her in that, I want to hold that position. Yeah. Not enable her, but be a voice of reason. And what better person? She comes to me more than I realize that she does for things. I'm like, oh, okay, check mark. Oh, okay, check mark. Okay, and let me just stay back and stay quiet, because that's when she comes. Right. Is when I'm here and I'm like here, that she pulls back a little bit. So that's been a learning experience for me too. That's an
interesting point.
And I see that in her. But she's, you know, as I mentioned earlier, she surprises me with some of the things that she's aware of. And that's me to realize, listen, just because you see her as a 16-year-old little girl in your mind, that doesn't make her that. You know, she's got her own experiences too. And she may touch the fire and get burned, but guess what? We have some, you know, we have some ointment and stuff we can put on there and help her heal it. And that's just a little growing pain. And, you know, as long as I can. And if there's a fire that she's actually going to get burned, I'm going to stand in that way. Projection, protection, whatever. That's just, I feel that's my job as her parent. If I could do that for her, then I will.
Yeah. As her parent.
When as a person too, as a friend, whoever, you know?
But no, and it's great because I'm thinking about it as we're talking about it, because I'm thinking like, what? Because, you know, when you're your mama, you are a warrior, right? You just go, you go to bat for your kids.
It don't matter.
I mean, so it's like, where's the line in that? You know what I mean? And I'm trying to think.
It's healthy for people to have that, know that they have somebody to depend on.
Has their back.
Yeah, family.
I don't think I'll continue to protect. If I know one of my kids is going to make a mistake, I'm going to intervene and say that's not going to work. Yeah. And if they decide to do it and they mess up, I'll be there to help them fix it.
Right. Don't ever want to make her feel like she's going to be disowned, not welcomed, not loved. You know, I may be firm on something and not agree with it, but as long as that she knows, has an understanding that mom's always going to love you no matter what.
Yeah.
You know, that door can open up for you no matter what. But your decisions are your decisions, and that's the path that you have to be responsible for. I can't. And that's where we're at right now in life.
I mean, I'm trying to think, like, I'm pondering a lot of stuff right now with the conversation, because I think about, I mean, obviously, like, you have a daughter, you have both two boys and a girl. And yeah, for me, you know, thinking of like my son now, but he's a young man. And I always think like the best kind of mother I can be to him in my mind is to let him be a man, right? And to let him get that emotional stamina and that mental stamina, and let him have his dignity with making decisions. I can't coddle him past at this point in his life, right? As much as I want to, as much as I want, because you don't ever want to see your kids go through things, right? You want to protect them from every emotional pain that you've felt. This is where I talk about protection versus projections. Like, I don't want his heart to be broken ever. But is that realistic? No, it's not realistic. But I don't want it. You know, I don't want him to lose a job or have hardships or whatever. But it's like, how do you appreciate all the joys of life if you don't have any of the sorrows?
Right. And one last note on being a mother to a daughter is being an example. I'm her example of what a woman is in that home, in a marriage, in mothering her, in all of those things. So there's a lot of pressure on myself that I put on myself, because I do know there's eyes watching. So now later on in life, as she's older, I find myself communicating with her on things that she may have witnessed or has an impression upon, that I want to understand her perspective so that we can communicate about that differently or clearly. Because, I mean, I was young, you know, I'm not who I was in my 20s or my 30s, you know, I'm going to be 43 years old. And it's just, that's the journey of life. And so those reasons for me as a mother, and I'm sure for a son, I always say, I wonder what my life would be like if I had a son. You know, I think there's just a different love, my opinion. Love is love, but that relationship between a mom and a son, I think there's just something different about that.
Definitely different. It's easier for me to let my son go. Like, I could let him go, but we have this, you know, mother-son bond, and I probably relate to him the most. My daughter, I'm harder on her, but I want to protect her and shelter her more. But I need her to understand. I think I've wanted her to handle things the way I handle them through life. And she's not me. And I have to understand she's not me. And I have to meet her where she is and help her find who she is. So that's something I've learned about myself.
That's actually very powerful, because that's true, right? When we've gone through things in our lives and I've become very hard because I've had a lot of hardships in life. And the way I handle things, I have this expectation sometimes of people being able to handle things the way I handle things. And particularly my son. And really being able to say, Lorraine, he is not you, nor has he had your life experiences for you to be, put this burden on him that he has to show up the way you show up and handle things. You got to let that go. And not just with my son, but just with everybody in my life. Like, let them be, girl. Like, I have such a hard time sometimes being like, no, this is not right. This is what you need to do. And it's like, let it go.
It's almost like we got to let God handle that one, you know, like, thank you. But this is not mine. This is between you and him. I'm here to witness and be there to if you need me. And I had to learn that even in a marriage, in a relationship, it's like, you know how to help them, but sometimes that's not your job. That's not your journey. You got to step back and let that ride happen on its own. Yeah. And that's a learning experience for sure. Good stuff.
Well, I mean, what do y'all want to
close up?
Yeah.
You know, having kids
projection over protection. I like how I just said that. Projection over protection. Because overprotective parents are projecting something. They are. When you are overprotective, that is something you're projecting onto your kids. Something is going on in your life that you don't trust enough to just let your kids be. You know, and I don't mean just let your kids run amok, because I don't believe in that. there's extremes. There's parents that are overly liberal with their kids, and I don't agree with that. And then there's parents that are way overprotective. It's like time and place. Please give your kids some manners. Teach them how to be respectful to adults. You know, they got to figure out life. Yeah, they
Basics,
do, but we're their guides too. Like, they're going to figure out life. You know, I know a lot of people, I've dated some latchkey kids that were just, their parents just let them run amok, and they just had the key to come in, and no parents were working or gone, and they raised themselves. And it is very evident in their adult life. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so it's like, I guess there's just a balance. You have to find the balance in it.
And we've tried to protect them from the things we went through, expecting them to be strong. Like, I got this, I'm going to take care of it, when mommy's taking care of everything for them. And now I expect you to take care of it. It's like, but I've been projecting that I don't want them to go through the things I went through in life.
And on both sides, I think we have to have a level of discernment and understanding all of that, because there is a rhyme and reason to momentum and understanding and teaching and protecting and projecting. I mean, there is a purpose for that too, but it's when it's overly done. And what is that, right? It depends on who you talk to.
And it's never too late to correct the relationship.
I was just going to say, not only that, but you also have to forgive yourself. Like, again, the intention versus the impact. I've always had nothing but the best intention for my son, because I just love him more than anything in this life. You know, a mother's love is a mother's love. And I know not everybody's privy to mother's love the same way, but I love the hell out of my kid, right? And so everything was with the greatest intention. But I have to be honest about some of the impact. And being able to sit down with him as a young adult and have those conversations and be comfortable and allow him to say what he experienced with me without me feeling like I need to defend it. Because I think that's another thing that we do as parents sometimes, is when our kids come to us and say, you know, you were this or you were that, because you feel bad to hear that you hurt them. You want to, well, I was going through this, or this is the reason why, or you don't understand, it was this, and they don't want to hear that. In that moment, they just need the validation to say, I didn't know it made you feel that way. And you let them get through the emotional cycle of it. And then later, you say to them, when you're ready and you want me to explain, I'll be happy to do so. But right now, I'm just in this space to validate you.
I have a thought to leave on the other side of this.
Okay.
So it could be in our parenting or in relationships. You know, there's a difference between protecting the person and protecting the sin, right? So sometimes bad behavior is bad behavior, but the person is the person. So in that, our children, not all children go down that. Some children go down past that, even if we are doing the best job we can as parents.
Yeah, true.
It happens, you know? So at that point, are we projecting or protecting? I'm going to protect my kid, but I'm not going to protect the sin. And I know that sin's there.
But what do you mean by
That's
that?
Drug use. I mean, just misbehave, things that are detrimentally not right, period. In our faith, in our walk, or in just reality. You know, just you do this, you get there. You do this. And sometimes our kids get lost, you know, and the core of who they are, I'm going to protect that person because that's my baby. And I know that heart is pure in there somewhere, but somewhere down the line, as well as we did, there's things that occur because we live in a...
Well, there are influences or whatever.
Correct.
And sometimes it is things that have happened in the home that we don't want to be accountable to, right? There's many different reasons why they go down those pathways. And of course, you're going to do whatever it takes to save someone that is falling like that, whether it's drug abuse or addiction or whatever. But there also comes to a point too where it cannot be a codependent relationship.
Sure.
And sometimes it goes into abuse. You know, kids can be abusive to their parents. There are some very entitled kids out there that are young adults that are abusive and disrespectful to their parents. And at some point, as much as you love and whatever, they are still making their choices for their life. And you can intervene and do as much as you want, but you can't control it. And you will drive yourself crazy when you're like trying to force a space that they just don't want to see. And the hardest thing when you see somebody falling and you've done everything and exhausted everything you can possibly do is to have to let them go, knowing that outcome could be fatal. Having to be able to sit in yourself and say, I have given my all to this, but they're still their own person. You know, and we can say we want to protect the sin all they want. Well, we can only do so much.
Yeah.
You know?
We can't protect the sin, that's for sure. You know, it's not that we can't. the sin is, that's a whole nother thing. The person is one thing, the actions is something else. And if we're doing all we can for the person and that's still there, we have to surrender to protect ourselves and let that be handled in other ways.
And it's a conversation that by the grace of God, it's not a conversation I can directly relate to because I've never had to deal with that, thank God. So I don't want to be out of pocket by saying something that I never experienced, because I don't know what I would do or how far I would go to, in my mind, I'd take my son to an island and he'd be stuck there. You better go find your drugs on this island till you sober. I don't know what I would do.
I can only relate from the experience I had with my son when he got arrested. He did not commit the crime. It took 7 months for us to get through with it. Even if he did it, I would have made sure that to my best ability, he would have been represented properly. I would have protected him as much as I could in that.
That's it. That's what I mean.
But I was still going to war for my son.
Yeah, of course.
Because I'm not going to let the system get a hold of my son. So that was one instance where I can relate. But as far as
and it's such a helpless feeling.
Oh my God, that was I do want to talk about it. I haven't talked about.
We should definitely have a conversation about that next time for sure.
An experience,
yeah. All right, ladies. Well,
let's not be like we're closing the sermon down and keep going.
Well, let us know. This is the Lipstick Lady podcast. Do not forget to subscribe to this new channel. We are all about topics. We're going to be doing some really cool topics parties. We're inviting guests to come and join us. We have some events planned coming up. We want to hear from you out there and let us know the comments, the topics. We're going to be talking about sex and relationships.
Sex, love,
We're going to laugh a little bit. We're going to talk about aging and all the glamour that comes with that. I mean, we're going to talk about it all, but we do want to hear from you. So stay tuned and do not forget to subscribe to the Lipstick Ladies.
There goes a good song to finish up with.
All right, yeah.
That's the commercial.